My name is David Carter and I'm 34 years old. I make my home in a modern apartment overlooking the Missouri River in Kansas City. And really, I'm a pretty ordinary person. My job is in IT project management, which is as unexciting as it sounds. I'm not the kind of guy who draws attention. Definitely not the center of any social gathering. My days follow a predictable rhythm. I head home from the office, fix myself a simple meal, maybe catch a Royals game on TV, or get through a chapter of a book before turning in for the night. It's a stable existence, if not a thrilling one. I've resided in this same building for the better part of a decade. The other tenants and I share polite nods in the elevator, but we don't socialize beyond that. I've always appreciated the calm and the routine, or at least I thought I did, until a chance encounter a few days ago shifted something inside me. It happened at the airport. I was waiting for a delayed flight to a tech conference in Chicago, just another part of the job. I was sitting near the gate, scrolling through emails on my phone when I noticed her. She was a few seats away, a woman who looked to be in her early 40s, with striking blonde hair and kind blue eyes that were currently clouded with sorrow. She was trying to be discreet, dabbing at her tears with a tissue, but her shoulders trembled with a grief that was impossible to hide. People walked past, caught up in their own travels, their own destinations, none of them seeming to notice her quiet pain. For some reason, I couldn't look away. There was a profound loneliness in her posture that resonated with a part of me I rarely acknowledged. Normally, I would have kept to myself. I'm not one to intrude on a stranger's private moment, but something about her vulnerability, the sheer unguarded sadness on her face, made it impossible for me to just sit there. After a few minutes of internal debate, I got up and walked over. I stood a respectful distance away, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I don't mean to bother you, but I saw you were upset. Is there anything I can do? Can I get you a bottle of water or something?" She looked up, startled, her eyes red and exhausted. She seemed to hesitate, assessing me for a moment before giving a small watery smile. "No, thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm okay. It's just my son just left for college. Now it's just me." Of course, I stayed. I sat down in the seat next to her, leaving an empty one between us for space. I offered her a tissue from the travel pack I always keep in my bag. I didn't push with more questions. I sensed she would share more if she wanted to. She sat with her hands clutching her purse, just staring at the gate where a plane was pulling away from the jet bridge. After a long shared silence, she finally spoke again, her voice a low murmur. "It's so quiet now," she said, almost to herself. "I thought I was prepared for this, but I don't think I want to go home to an empty house." I just nodded, telling her that she didn't need to explain anything. We just sat there for a while, watching the airport bustle around us, letting the silence be a cushion for her grief. It wasn't an uncomfortable quiet. In a strange way, it felt companionable. After a while, she began to talk about her son, Ethan. She spoke of how her entire life for the last 18 years had revolved around him, about how imperfect their family had become after her divorce years ago, and how she felt more like a single-minded caregiver than a person with her own identity. She wasn't sobbing anymore. It was more like she was allowing years of pent-up feelings to surface, a slow and steady release. She turned to me, her expression raw with honesty. "I know it must sound selfish," she said, "but a part of me feels like I've already been grieving this for years, like I lost my own life long before he even left." I didn't have the right words to respond to that, so I said very little, simply nodding and letting her know I was listening. That seemed to be all she needed in that moment. Before I had to leave for my rescheduled flight, she looked around the chaotic terminal and managed a genuine soft smile. "Thank you for sitting with me," she said. And just like that, our time was up. I had to board my plane and she had to head back to her quiet home. But something had fundamentally shifted for both of us. The morning after I met the woman at the airport, I couldn't get my mind to focus. I had follow-up emails to send, project timelines to adjust, and a report that was due by the end of the week. But my thoughts kept drifting back to her, sitting in that sterile airport chair, clutching a crumpled tissue as if it were a lifeline. I didn't even know her name. Something about the way she'd spoken with such unvarnished, quiet honesty had worked its way under my skin. Not in an intrusive way, but it lingered with me. By midday, I realized I hadn't eaten anything. I was just staring blankly at the same spreadsheet I'd opened 2 hours earlier when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Emily Harris, the crying woman from the airport yesterday. You gave me your number in case I needed to talk. I hope this isn't weird, but I was wondering if I could buy you that coffee I owe you for your kindness." I stared at the message, surprised she'd actually reached out. There she was again, figuratively knocking on my door. I typed back almost immediately. "Not weird at all. I'd like that. I'm free for lunch if you are." She suggested a small deli a few blocks from my office. She didn't wait for me to suggest a place, just took the lead. And for some reason, her decisiveness felt comforting, natural. We met outside on the cafe's small patio. The Kansas City sky was overcast and heavy, but the air was crisp and invigorating. She was dressed simply in jeans and a soft gray sweater that seemed to warm up the blue in her eyes. She handed me a menu, and we both sat there quietly for a moment, just taking in the midday bustle around us. We didn't speak much at first, and I didn't try to force conversation. She took small sips of her water, her gaze fixed on a mural painted on the brick wall across the street, as if her mind was 1,000 miles away. Eventually, she was the one who broke the quiet. "It's so strange," she said, her voice gentle. "I thought I would feel completely shattered, you know? I pictured myself just crying for days. But instead, I mostly feel hollow, like I'm an actor walking through the scenes of someone else's life." I glanced over at her, but she didn't meet my eyes. She kept them on the colorful mural. "I've had this tightness in my chest for so long, David, even before Ethan left. It's like the grief started years ago when his father and I split, when I stopped really seeing myself as anything other than a mother." I let her speak, not daring to interrupt. I just sat there and absorbed her words. She sighed, then went on. "We used to be so close, my ex-husband and I. I truly loved him, but then his career took over. He was always traveling, always working late, always distracted. I got used to eating dinner alone with my son. We lived under the same roof, but it felt like we were on different planets." She finally turned to look at me, her eyes a little glossy, but clear and direct. "Have you ever felt like you were slowly becoming invisible in your own life?" I nodded, not because I'd experienced the same thing, but because I recognized the profound loneliness she was describing. "I think everyone feels it at some point in one way or another." There was a brief silence, and then she let out a soft, almost self-conscious laugh. "I'm so sorry. I didn't intend to unload all of this on you. I just haven't had anyone to talk to about it." "You don't have to apologize," I told her sincerely. "Sometimes all you need is someone to listen." She gave me a look that was grateful and maybe a little surprised. For the next hour, we just talked. Not about her son or her divorce anymore. We talked about small, simple things. Movies we both loved, our favorite coffee shops in the city, the time she tried to bake a ridiculously complicated cake that ended up looking like a deflated balloon. I told her about the time I accidentally replied, all to a company-wide email with a meme that was definitely not work-appropriate. She laughed at that, a full genuine laugh. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked like a person who still had immense joy inside her. At one point, as she was reaching for her glass, her hand brushed against mine on the small bistro table. It lingered there for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the contact to register with both of us before she gently pulled it away. Her expression shifted, just a flicker of something, maybe guilt or maybe just confusion. "I should probably go," she said abruptly, gathering her purse. "This is probably too much, too soon. I don't want you to think I'm just using you as some kind of emotional sounding board." I stood up as well. "You're not," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. She paused by the edge of the patio. "I just really didn't want to be alone today." I nodded. "Then don't be. Anytime you need to talk or just not talk, I'm here." There was an unspoken weight in the silence that hung between us, as if neither of us wanted to put a name to what was happening. But we both felt it, A connection, a warmth, a closeness that neither of us had anticipated. She nodded slowly. "Thank you, David. Truly." Then she turned and walked down the street toward her car. I watched her go, her shoulders back, her hair catching the afternoon breeze. Something had definitely changed. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew we had crossed some invisible boundary. Nothing physical had occurred. No kiss, no embrace, but still an unspoken understanding had begun to form between us, and I had a feeling it wasn't going to just fade away. The next day started quietly. It was a cloudy morning, and the kind of dense, humid air that usually precedes a summer thunderstorm hung low over the city. I sat at my kitchen counter with a lukewarm cup of coffee, trying to focus on my laptop screen. But my mind wasn't on work. Kept circling back to Emily. It wasn't just the fact that we'd had lunch. It was the way it had felt to be with her. Her presence had a way of staying with me long after she was gone. I couldn't shake her words from my head, or the way she'd looked at me with that complex mixture of loss and recognition. And then there was that fleeting moment, just a small brush of our hands on the table, but it had imprinted itself on my memory like something much more significant. Sometime after lunch, I found myself standing by the large window in my living room that overlooked the street. I wasn't consciously looking for her, or at least that's what I told myself, but a part of me was hoping for another text, another sign. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and then my phone chimed. It was her. The message was simple. "Are you busy tonight? I could use a friend." I knew before I even replied what my answer would be. I invited her to my apartment, suggesting we could order some food and watch a movie, keeping it casual and pressure-free. She agreed immediately. A couple of hours later, there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it and Emily was standing there in a simple navy blue dress that hung gracefully on her frame. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. She looked tired, but her eyes held a quiet intensity as if she'd spent the day wrestling with her thoughts. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said, stepping aside without a moment's hesitation. She walked past me into the living room, moving more slowly this time, more hesitantly than she had at the restaurant, as if she wasn't entirely sure she should be there. I didn't rush her. I just stood for a moment, watching her scan the room as if it might hold some kind of answer for her. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been going back and forth about it all afternoon, but I just couldn't stand the thought of another evening alone." "You don't ever need a reason to be here," I said gently. Emily drifted toward the couch and sat down, curling her legs up on one side, like someone trying to make themselves small and safe. I sat in the armchair across from her, giving her plenty of space. It was quiet for a bit, just the distant sound of city traffic and the hum of my refrigerator. "I don't know how to be alone," she finally admitted, breaking the silence. "I went from my parents' house to my college dorm and then straight into living with my husband. Then Ethan was born. There was always someone there. Now, for the first time in my life, it's just me." I nodded slowly. "That's a huge adjustment." She let out a long, shaky breath. "The thing is, I felt alone for a long time, even when my house was full. It's like I was mourning the end of my marriage and the end of my role as a full-time mom before either of them were even officially over." Her words were heavy with truth, and I could tell it took a lot for her to say them. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "That kind of loneliness is the worst," I said. "It's a different kind of pain when someone is physically present but emotionally a million miles away." She looked at me then, her gaze direct and searching. Her voice dropped even lower. "Do you think it's wrong that I don't feel guilty for being here? I don't feel guilty talking to you like this so soon after my son left." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to choose my words carefully. "No," I said firmly. "I don't think there's a set timeline for grief or for human connection. Sometimes people come into our lives exactly when we need them the most. That doesn't make it wrong." Her eyes softened as if she'd been holding her breath, waiting for my judgment. "I just didn't expect to feel drawn to someone right now," she whispered. "Neither did I." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her dress. "I don't want to go back to my house tonight. Not because I'm running from anything, but because I feel like I'll suffocate if I have to sit in that silence again. I could hear the genuine fear in her voice. It wasn't melodrama or an exaggeration. It was a woman who had reached the absolute limit of what she could endure by herself. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. "If you need a place to just breathe, you can stay here. I have a guest room." Emily blinked quickly, a few tears finally escaping and tracing paths down her cheeks. "I didn't expect you to say that." "You're not alone, Emily." She nodded slowly, and for the first time that day, a tiny, fragile smile touched her lips. Later, I pulled clean sheets from the hall closet and made up the bed in the spare room while she sat in the living room sipping a cup of chamomile tea I'd made for her. We didn't talk much more. The silence felt natural now, comfortable and safe. Before she went to her room, she came over to where I was standing in the kitchen. No drama, no rush, just a quiet nearness. "Thank you, David," she said softly. "For this, for not asking too many questions, for making me feel like a person again." Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It wasn't rushed. It was purely human. Her head rested against my shoulder, and I held her with both arms, trying to offer a sense of stability and calm. It was the kind of hug that you remember long after it's over. When we finally separated, she whispered, "Good night," and then she disappeared down the hall into the guest room. I stood there for a long time, alone in my quiet apartment, still feeling the warmth of her embrace. And for the first time in many years, I realized something significant had changed within my own quiet life. I didn't get much sleep that night, not because anything had happened. It hadn't, but because I was so aware of her presence. I was aware that Emily was in the room just down the hall, aware of the immense weight she was carrying, and acutely aware that this wasn't just a new acquaintance crashing for a night. This was a woman whose entire world had just been upended, who now, for reasons she might not even fully grasp, chose to seek refuge in my home. The walls of my apartment seemed thinner. Every creak of the building seemed amplified, and my thoughts refused to settle down. I kept replaying the hug in my mind. It hadn't been romantic or dramatic. It was just profoundly human, an honest expression of need and comfort. It was the kind of embrace you don't forget, not because of what it might lead to, but because of how deeply necessary it felt for both of us. When the first hint of dawn began to lighten the sky over the river, I finally gave up on sleep and got out of bed. The apartment was completely silent. I moved quietly, not wanting to disturb her. I started a pot of coffee, the rich aroma slowly filling the kitchen, and stood by the window, holding the warm mug in both hands, watching the soft morning light paint the skyline. About 20 minutes later, I heard the soft, cautious sound of her footsteps in the hallway, as if she were worried she was intruding. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the light gray blanket from the guest room. Her hair was tousled from sleep, her expression calm, but tired. She was still beautiful, but in a different way now, more raw, more real. "Morning," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied with a small smile. "I made coffee." She nodded, stepping into the kitchen and accepting the mug I offered. We stood there for a while without speaking, just sipping our coffee. There was something about the shared silence. It wasn't awkward at all. It was restful. Eventually, she sat down at my small kitchen table, pulling the blanket more tightly around her shoulders. She stared out the window for a long moment before saying, "I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." I sat down in the chair across from her. "I don't think you're supposed to, Emily. You're just figuring things out 1 minute at a time. That's more than enough." She nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "I keep thinking about how it felt yesterday, just sitting here talking, being able to breathe. Felt like I reclaimed a tiny piece of myself." Then she looked at me directly, her blue eyes holding something that wasn't romance or confusion, but just a profound depth. "My ex-husband and I, we weren't really a couple for years. We lived together. We shared a life on paper, but emotionally we were just two strangers occupying the same space. I didn't even realize how hollow I'd become until I left that house for the last time." I listened intently, not interrupting. I could tell she needed to articulate these thoughts to give them voice. I came here yesterday because I couldn't stand the silence in my own home anymore. And now I don't want to go back. Not yet. She stayed for the entire day. We didn't formulate a plan. She just stayed. I made us some scrambled eggs and toast for a late breakfast. She helped me fold a load of laundry, and she laughed when she discovered a single bright pink sock that had somehow infiltrated my collection of black and gray ones. At one point in the afternoon, we went for a walk along the riverfront. Just a slow, casual loop. We didn't hold hands, but our shoulders brushed against each other a few times. A small electric contact that neither of us acknowledged. The day unfolded gently, without any pressure or expectation. That evening, I cooked us dinner, a simple pasta with a fresh salad. Afterward, we ended up on the couch in the living room. She tucked her legs beneath her, holding a cup of tea with both hands. I sat beside her, close but not crowding her. A nature documentary played on the television. It sounded a low murmur in the background, but we weren't really paying attention to it. Then, very quietly, she said, "It's strange. I feel a sense of peace here, like I'm allowed to just exist without having to be someone for somebody else. I haven't felt that in so long." I turned to look at her. "You don't have to rush anything. There's no instruction manual for this." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine for something. Permission maybe, or just understanding. "Do you think it's wrong that I don't feel bad about this, about being here?" She asked again, needing reassurance. "No," I said gently. "I think you're doing exactly what you need to do to heal. There's nothing wrong with that." Her head leaned against my shoulder, a gesture of trust. I let her rest there, my arm naturally finding its way around her. Not in a forceful or suggestive way, but just to be a steady presence. And then, in that quiet moment, something shifted between us. She looked up at me, our faces closer than they had ever been. Her gaze lingered on my lips for a moment. I could feel the warmth of her breath, and then slowly, tentatively, she leaned in. Her lips met mine softly, carefully, like a question she wasn't sure she had the right to ask. We kissed just once. Nothing rushed, no fireworks, just a profound connection. Two people trying to feel something other than loneliness and pain. She pulled back slightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't have to be," I replied, my voice just as quiet. We didn't kiss again that night. She leaned back against me, this time resting her head against my chest, and we stayed like that for what felt like an hour, quiet and still. Something had changed, and neither of us felt the need to say it out loud. I think at the time I didn't fully comprehend how deep the connection between us had grown until much later. In the beginning, we were just two lonely people figuring out how to navigate the new circumstances we'd been handed. For what felt like an hour, we sat in that quiet stillness. Something had undeniably changed, but neither of us wanted to name it, to risk breaking the spell. Looking back, I don't think I truly understood the depth of the bond forming between us till much later. In those early days, we were simply two people learning how to live with the lives we found ourselves in. But as the days turned into a week, something about the sheer simplicity of our shared time together, those quiet morning coffees, the long rambling conversations, the comfortable silences began to feel like something more substantial, something incredibly real. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic transformation. It was a gradual evolution that began after that quiet night when Emily had stayed over and we shared that one kiss so gentle and hesitant. Felt more like a question than a statement. We didn't immediately fall into a passionate romance. In fact, after that night, we took a step back, both of us instinctively knowing we needed time to process what was happening. She went back to her own house the next day, and it wasn't awkward. It felt like a natural part of the process. Neither of us was ready to dive head first into something we didn't yet understand. We both needed to move at our own pace. For the next few weeks, Emily stayed in her suburban house. She told me she wasn't ready to abandon it, and I understood completely. She needed to confront the emptiness, to clean it out, to sort through the memories that lingered in every room. But she drove into the city to see me almost every day, sometimes just for a quick coffee, other times for a long walk. The grief for her old life was still present, a heavy weight on her heart, but a sense of quiet companionship was steadily growing between us. one that didn't require grand romantic gestures or overwhelming confessions of love. I'd have coffee brewing when she arrived in the mornings, and we'd sit on my couch sipping it slowly while she shared her thoughts. Sometimes she would cry, overwhelmed by a memory or the sheer magnitude of the change in her life. Other times she would laugh at something silly I said, like when I tried to assemble a piece of furniture and ended up with a lopsided bookshelf that looked like a modern art installation. I found myself smiling more than I had in years. Something about her presence was slowly, steadily bringing me back to life, and in turn she was changing too. I could see it clearly. Her eyes, which had been so full of sorrow when I first saw her, started to hold a different light. She began to smile more freely, and her laughter came more easily. She started talking about her passions she had set aside, her love for painting, her dream of traveling to Italy, things she had enjoyed before her life became entirely about others. I could see her rediscovering herself piece by piece. It wasn't a fast or easy process, but with each day we spent together, I could tell she was healing. Not completely. Grief doesn't work that way, but she was learning to live alongside it. I could see her finding herself again bit by bit. It wasn't a rushed process. It wasn't easy. But each moment, each day we spent together, I could tell that she was healing. Not completely. Grief doesn't work like that, but she was learning to live with it. As time went on, I realized that I was learning how to do the same. Healing from a loneliness I hadn't even known I was carrying. Then one Saturday, about a month after we met, she invited me to her house for dinner. I hadn't been there before, and I felt a knot of nervousness tighten in my gut as I drove out to the suburbs. Her house, after all, was the epicenter of her old life, the place she had felt so trapped, the place her son had left from. But she had invited me, and this time it felt different. It felt like a deliberate step forward. I brought a bottle of red wine. She cooked a simple but delicious meal, grilled chicken, and roasted vegetables. We ate on her back deck as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The evening air was cool and pleasant, the kind of night where you can just sit and enjoy the stillness of the world around you. We didn't talk excessively during dinner. We didn't have to. The conversation flowed easily, as if we'd been doing this for years. There was no pressure, no expectation, just the soft clinking of our forks, the distant hum of cicadas, and the occasional shared smile when one of us said something funny. As the night stretched on, the sky darkened to a deep indigo, and the soft light from the string lights she had hung over the deck cast a gentle glow on us. That's when she looked at me, and her expression was different than any I had seen before. It wasn't sadness in her eyes anymore or uncertainty. It was something steady, something sure. "I think I'm ready," she said, her voice clear in the quiet night. "Ready for what?" I asked, unsure of where the conversation was heading. "Ready to let myself actually move forward. I've been stuck for so long, David, and I didn't know how to get out of it. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can. Not because you're fixing me, but because you helped me see that it's okay to want a new chapter, that I don't have to be defined by the roles I've lost." Her words hit me with more force than I expected. I didn't say anything at first. I just reached across the small patio table and took her hand in mine. Felt right, completely natural. I didn't need to say anything. She knew I understood. I knew too. She smiled, a real radiant smile, and I realized just how far she had come. I just reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. Felt so right, so natural. I didn't need to speak. She knew I understood her completely, and I knew she understood me. She smiled then, a truly open, beautiful smile, and in that moment, I saw the incredible distance she had traveled in such a short period. This was no longer just about her recovering from her past. It was about her actively building something new, something unexpected, but something wonderfully good. "I don't need to rush into anything," she continued, her thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. "But when I picture a future for myself, now you're in it, and that means something to me." It was my turn to smile. A wave of warmth and a touch of nervous excitement spreading through me. "I don't need to rush either," I said softly. "We can take all the time in the world, but I want to be there with you, Emily. I think we both deserve that. The silence that followed wasn't heavy or awkward. It was full of a shared, unspoken understanding. There were no more questions, just a mutual certainty that whatever came next, we would face it together. From that night on, things were different. We didn't suddenly leap into a whirlwind romance. We didn't need to. We continued to take our time. We still had our quiet mornings together and our long evenings filled with conversation or simply doing ordinary things around the house. We cherished the simplicity of our companionship. And as the days and weeks passed, we found ourselves leaning on each other more and more. We didn't rush, but slowly we both came to the quiet realization that we had found something real, something profound, something worth holding on to with both hands. A few months later, after countless dinners, late-night talks, and shared quiet moments, I found myself waking up next to her almost every day. It wasn't the loud, chaotic, dramatic kind of love you read about in novels or see in movies. It was the kind that felt steady and true, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual support. It wasn't about the grand gestures. It was about the small, everyday things. The way she'd bring me coffee in the morning. The way I'd save her the last piece of chocolate. The quiet comfort of just being in the same room. I was happy, truly, and deeply happy. And so was she. And that's how I knew this was the right kind of ending. The kind that was really a beginning where we both found a way to move forward. Not by forgetting our pasts, but by refusing to let them define our future. And just like that, our story was no longer about loss or loneliness. It had become a story about healing, about connection, and about the beautiful, unexpected gift of a second chance.